Okay.
Go
Our
ahead.
mission. Helping Parents Heal is a nonprofit organization dedicated to assisting bereaved parents. Through support and resources offered, we aspire to help individuals become shining light parents, meaning a shift from a state of emotional heaviness to one of hopefulness and greater peace of mind. Helping Parents Heal goes a step beyond other groups by allowing the open discussion of spiritual experiences and afterlife evidence in a non dogmatic way. Helping Parents Heal affiliate groups welcome everyone, regardless of religious or non religious background, and encourage open dialogue. Attendance at all Helping Parents Heal meetings is voluntary. All discussions that take place at affiliate led meetings are confidential. We hope that participants will learn from and share with each other. Zoom meetings run by leadership are not confidential. These meetings typically feature guest presenters and are posted on YouTube so that affiliate members worldwide can watch and benefit. Neither type of Helping Parents Heal meeting is designed to replace traditional therapy or spiritual counseling. Helping Parents Heal offers a wide variety of speakers, allowing parents to learn about many possible ways to heal. This includes presenters covering progressive topics such as afterlife evidence, and connecting with our children who have passed. The views expressed by our guest speakers may or may not reflect the opinions of Helping Parents Heal leaders and members, so we ask that you take from their presentations whatever may benefit you personally. Welcome, everyone.
Yes, welcome everyone. And again, we are just thrilled to have both Rob Schwartz and Liesel Fricke with us. And I was just telling Rob that he was one of our first big speakers on a national level, national level, years ago, because we had a telephone conference call with him, which was very exciting. And that was all that existed back then. So we're really happy that we have Zoom these days. It makes everything so much easier. I'm going to do some bios for Rob and for Liesel so that you know a little bit more about them. Rob Schwartz is a hypnotist who offers Between Lives Soul Regressions, BLSRs, to help people heal and understand their life plan. In a BLSR, you can speak directly with the Council of Elders, wise, loving, and highly evolved beings who can tell you what you planned for your current lifetime and why, how well you're fulfilling your plan and how you may better fulfill your plan. Rob's first book, Your Soul's Plan, Discovering the Real Meaning of the Life You Planned Before You Were Born, explores the pre-birth planning of physical illness, having disabled children, deafness, blindness, drug addiction, alcoholism, the death of a loved one, and accidents. His second book, Your Soul's Gift, The Healing Power of the Life You Planned Before You Were Born, explores the pre-birth planning of spiritual awakening, miscarriage, abortion, suicide, caregiving, sexuality, adoption, having pets, poverty, mental illness, and other life challenges and experiences. Rob's books have been translated into 25 languages. He teaches internationally on the subject of pre-birth planning at venues such as the United Nations, Kripalu, 1440 Multiversity, and Hollyhock. For more information, visit Robert online at www.yoursoulsplan.com or write to him directly at rob.schwartz@yoursoulsplan.com. He will be joined by Liesel Fricke, his wife. Liesel helps people all over the world transform their consciousness and lives through the workshops she co-teaches with her husband, Rob Schwartz. Liesel understands firsthand the powerful mechanism of transformation that intense life challenges can be when we allow them to crack us open. In response to her own intense struggles and with severe obsessive compulsive disorder and depression, Liesel opened and surrendered to the depths of her being. The spiritual opening that followed led her capacity to connect with unity consciousness, oneness, and the loving, wise beings that reside in this state of consciousness, who she and Rob affectionately call the beings of light. It is Liesel's highest priority to share the profound love and wisdom of these highly evolved light beings with humanity in messages, teachings, and meditations she channels. Liesel and Rob are thrilled to be currently working on a book based on many of the channelings. They are excited to share with the world the powerful love and insight that emerges from the sacred internal and external place where we are all one. It is within this oneness field that we can all find the truth of who we are as infinite, unbounded love. And without further ado, let me go ahead and pass this over to beautiful Liesel, who's going to be leading us in a short guided meditation. Please welcome Liesel with me. Thank you, Liesel.
Hi, everyone. Hi. Well, welcome. So, it's interesting whenever we lead a talk or a workshop, I'm always connecting in with the beings of light ahead of time and kind of getting that connection going. And I feel there's so much love and support and compassion from the other side for each and every one of you. It actually is it kind of makes me like my human side makes me a little teary, because there's just this outpouring of love and support, and this sense of each and every one of you is being held by so much love from the other side. So I just felt the need to share that. So before we get started sharing what we're going to share tonight, I'd just like us all to take the opportunity to get grounded and centered, to let go of our days, to let go of the day. So just get comfortable. If you want, you can put your left hand on your heart area and your right hand just below your navel. These two hand positions I really like. They feel like they really help support the body, but it's not necessary. It's just if that's something that feels good and is comfortable for you. And if it's safe to do so, you can gently close your eyes. Begin bringing awareness to the breath. To the in-breath, followed by the out-breath. That beautiful rhythm and tide of life. Whenever you feel overwhelmed, just come back to this simple rhythm of breathing in and breathing out. And as you breathe in peace and serenity. And as you breathe out, let go of all heaviness. Let go of all which no longer serves. Breathing in this present moment, right here, right now. Breathing out all past and future. Allowing yourself to be here right now in the simplicity of this present moment. Bringing awareness more deeply in the body. Beginning to feel that subtle energy field of the body, that subtle aliveness. And bringing some awareness to the soles of your feet and connecting to and allowing in that beautiful energy of Mother Earth, of Gaia. Just allowing her energy to flow in and heal you. Allowing that energy to flow wherever it is needed, wherever you could use more resource. She has so much love and support to give, and so longs to nourish you. And just drinking in that beautiful grounding energy of Mother Earth, just allowing that golden energy to move up in you everywhere it is called for. Just allowing that to move all the way into your body, all the way up the torso and the limbs, all the way into the head, to the top of the head. There at the top of the head, just open to receive beautiful column of divine white light, source energy, fundamental beingness, beautiful divine white light. And just allow that energy to move in from source through your crown chakra, just coming in, replenishing you, filling your being, filling your body with source energy. That one field made of love and light that we are all a part of, that runs throughout the entire universe. Just allowing that energy into your body. Just allowing it to move wherever it is needed, to every nook and cranny, every space. Just filling you with fundamental beingness. All the way down to your soles of your feet. And then bring some awareness to your heart area. Just feel in that space in your heart. Feel those swirling energies of Mother Earth energy and source energy. And your own energy. Really all just different facets of the one love and light field that is. And it is in this field where you are always intertwined and connected with all beings that you love. They are always there in you, in this heart space. In this energetic field of consciousness, which is ultimately who you are and is ultimately who every other being is. For truly, there is actually only one being in all the universe. And just keeping some awareness in your heart area. Gently begin opening your eyes, bringing awareness back into the room, back into the space, back to the screen for this gift of time that we get to share with one another.
You have to unmute, Elizabeth. There you are.
I had unmuted. I guess you muted me. I was just saying that that was beautiful. And I so appreciate being able to do these meditations before our meetings. It's just such a wonderful thing to do. And now hopefully Rob is still with us, and I would love to bring Rob on if that's possible. Rob, are you unmuted and can you say something?
I'm here and I should be unmuted, I think.
You are wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and spotlight you as well. And thank you so much for being here. And we'd love to hear what you have to say about soul planning.
Yeah, so thanks for having me back. As you know, I'm a big supporter of helping parents heal, and I just believe that your organization is doing wonderful, beautiful work in the world. And I'm always honored to be a part of any meeting that I'm invited to be part of. I want to talk a little bit about soul planning, which is my area of expertise. So I want to start by saying that the idea of pre-birth planning, I always say that our work is an offering. It's not an attempt at persuasion. And I always sincerely mean that. It's an offering of a perspective that I have found to be tremendously helpful and healing in my own life in regard to my own challenges. And so I offer it to you in a spirit of helpfulness. And if what I say resonates as truth to you, if you think it can be helpful, then pick up the ball and run with it. If it doesn't resonate as true, take the parts that don't resonate and set them aside. But it's not an attempt to persuade you of anything. So the soul plan, and I should say plans here because there are many pre-birth plans. The soul plans are created, as I understand it, by the soul, by the higher self, in consultation with God or source, angels, masters, other highly evolved beings. And once the plan is in place, then the higher self informs the personality, that's each one of us, which is a portion of the soul's overall energy. The soul informs the personality of what the plans consist of. Now, when you are informed of the pre-birth plan, you feel this great, overwhelming, unconditional love radiating from your higher self, radiating from your spirit guides. You sense their extraordinary wisdom. You have a knowing that this plan, even if it's very challenging, is for the highest good of all beings. So the vast, vast majority of people who are about to incarnate agree to the plans as soon as they're informed of them, and then they go into body. There's a small percentage who, when they are told what the plans are, start to experience human emotions like fear or doubt, essentially fear or doubt that it might be a bit too much. If you express fear or doubt that any part of the plans might be too much, you are reassured by your higher self and by your spirit guides that the plans are based on great wisdom and unconditional love for everybody involved. Again, you sense and feel the great wisdom and the unconditional love of the guides and the higher self. And so the vast majority of those who express fear or doubt are now reassured, they consent to the plans, and then they incarnate. There's a small percentage of the small percentage who express fear or doubt who continue to express fear or doubt. If you do that, then the plan is amended until it's acceptable to you. So bottom line, as I understand it, nobody is ever forced to do anything that they don't actually want to do. Now, obviously, the big question here is, why would you agree to a life plan that includes the loss of a child, or perhaps even more than one child? The first thing I want to say about that is that your perspective when you're back on the other side is very, very different than it is when you're here in a body. The first main difference is that from the non-physical vantage point, you are acutely aware of the fact that a lifetime on Earth is actually very brief. It's here and it's gone like a clap of thunder. You may or may not have that perspective when you're here in body, and certainly if you're suffering, sometimes it seems to be interminable. But from the non-physical vantage point, you know that a lifetime is actually extremely brief. A second key difference in perspective is that from the non-physical, you know that nobody is permanently harmed by anything that happens here. Again, you may or may not know that while you're here in body, but you absolutely do know that when you're on the other side. And the third key difference in perspective is that from the non-physical vantage point, you're very much aware that the healing, the expansion, the learning, the growth, the evolution, the wisdom that come out of an incarnation will become part of you and part of your higher self, literally for all eternity. So from that vantage point, that a lifetime is actually very brief, nobody is permanently harmed by anything that happens here, and yet the wisdom becomes part of you literally for all eternity. From that perspective, it does make sense, at least to me, that some souls, not all, but some would agree to extremely difficult life plans. Now, to get more specific about it, let's ask the question, why would an incarnating personality agree to lose a child or perhaps more than one child? There are many potential answers to that question. For our purposes tonight, I want to talk a little bit about something called divine virtues. So for those who have not read any portion of any of my books, the way I research people's pre-birth plans, two ways: by working with mediums and channels who in one way or another could access that kind of information, and then the kind of hypnosis I practice, the Between Lives Soul Regression. So in working with the mediums and channels, I had the opportunity to actually go into people's pre-birth planning sessions and hear the conversations that took place when big life challenges were being discussed and planned. And over a period of years, I noticed something interesting about these discussions, and that is when the most difficult challenges were being considered, there was a lot of discussion at the soul level about a soul's desire to cultivate and then express, while in body, certain qualities that are very important to the soul. And I gave these qualities the name divine virtues. And over a period of years, I put together a list of the ones that came up the most often in the pre-birth planning sessions. I think there are now 28 on the list. And in our 2-day awakening workshop, we actually do something called the divine virtues exercise, in which you can determine which virtues you're working on. These are qualities like compassion, unconditional love, patience, empathy, faith, trust, perseverance, and so on. These are qualities that are very important to the soul. And what the soul would like you, the incarnate personality, to do is both cultivate and express the virtues And when I say express, I mean express in some form of service to others. That's the form of expression that the soul wants from the personality. So I can make this more easily understood. Elizabeth, do I have access to the whiteboard?
Yes, you do. Let's see, the whiteboard. Do you mean sharing your screen? I'm not.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Whiteboards, I see what that is. You should because you're a co-host, and I've never used that function before. So you can try it. Or if
Okay.
you'd like to share your screen, you're welcome to do so as well.
Let me see if I can figure this out. I'm not very tech savvy.
Do you see the whiteboard symbol? Oh, yes. Looks like you're.
Okay, I think that's it. All right, so I'm going to draw a graph here if I can figure out how to do that.
Not sure if you're in the whiteboard or not, are you?
Maybe I'm not. Well, this might work though. No, it's not working. All right, well, I'll just describe it then. But now I have to get out of this screen. How do I do that? Okay, there we go. So what I would have drawn if I could have figured out how to do it, if you think of a basic graph, so you've got the X or horizontal axis, the Y or vertical axis. In the Divine Virtues exercise, I draw a graph in which the X-axis represents time. The 0 point on the X-axis is when you're born, and then if you have an average lifespan, you would die somewhere toward the far right end of the X-axis. The Y or vertical axis represents your level of consciousness. So we put a point on the Y-axis about a third of the way up. That's great. So Lisa's got a good graph there. Except that that line should actually start about a third of the way up. But
Sorry.
that point that would be a third of the way up, that's your level of consciousness that you bring into the body at birth. So just shift those lines that Liesel has drawn up about a third of the way on the Y-axis. So you start there at birth with that level of consciousness. And then the life plan calls for you to spend a number of years making incremental gains in consciousness. That's the first part of the line. And then the plan calls for that spike in consciousness to happen. The inflection point there that Liesel is pointing toward, that inflection point is most likely a life challenge that you yourself agreed to before you were born in the hope that your level of consciousness would spike up like that. Now, the inflection point could be almost anything. But given humanity's current state of evolution, certain challenges are chosen much more frequently than others as inflection points. One of the most commonly chosen life challenges is the death of a loved one. If it's not the death of a loved one, then very often it's an illness. And if it's an illness, very often it's cancer. And if it's not the death of a loved one or an illness, then very often it's an accident, which is not really an accident. So that spike in consciousness, that is the second part of the line there, that represents you growing in one or more of the divine virtues. The increase, the growth in one or more virtues is an increase in frequency or vibration. So what the soul is hoping for is that the life challenge, in this case, the loss of a child, serves as both the opportunity and the motivation to cultivate the virtues. The average person is working on 2 or 3 virtues in a lifetime. Occasionally, somebody's working on 4 or 5. As far as I know, nobody is working on more than 5. That would be too much for anybody to take on. And the person who's working on 4 or 5 generally has a life filled with trauma. The vast majority, again, are working on 2 or 3. So the question then becomes, and Lisa, you can put the paper down now. The question then becomes, if one of your primary motivations for agreeing to this type of life plan is to cultivate one or more divine virtues, which virtues are you working on? Well, the first one that comes to my mind is compassion. And it would be self-compassion, and compassion for all beings, for all sentient beings. Another virtue that you would likely be working on would be faith, and another one would be trust. By faith, I don't mean religious faith. I mean faith that we live in a benign and loving universe. Trust could be trust in God or source, trust in the universe, trust in self, trust in other beings. Perseverance is a big one here. I think perseverance tends to be a virtue that older souls work on in later incarnations. And there could, go ahead.
What I'm getting is also an important one is coming into a greater sense of your strength and power.
Yeah, that's also one of the virtues. I couldn't think of a single word for it, so we just call it coming into a greater knowing of your strength and power. That's very important. And that actually reminds me of a story about that particular virtue. Many years ago, I was talking with a woman who at the time we were speaking was divorced. And she shared with me the following true story that had begun years earlier when she was married. When she was married, she and her husband had 2 sons. And when the sons were in their early teens, she and her husband divorced. And then not long after the divorce, the then ex-husband actually murdered the 2 sons and then took his own life. And within a very short time of this tragedy taking place, the pain from it essentially cracked her open, and it opened up her psychic gifts. She became both clairvoyant and clairaudient. She started to see and talk to her 2 sons who were back on the other side. Well, of course, the first question she asked them was, how in the world did this happen? And her son said, Mom, all of us, including Dad, planned this before any of us were born. And then, of course, she said, well, why in the world would I have agreed to such a plan? And her son said, and I quote, because you wanted to come into a greater knowing of your strength and power. So a tremendously difficult and painful way to do it. But you can also see where if she's successful, it will be a very powerful and effective way to do it. So these are some of the virtues that you could be working on in this lifetime. And I want to come back again to the ideas that a lifetime here is very brief. Nobody is permanently harmed by anything that happens here. And yet the wisdom, in this case, the growth in the divine virtues, becomes part of you and part of your soul for all eternity. I want to say a word about suicide, and then I'll pass the baton to Liesel. In my second book, Your Soul's Gift, there's an entire chapter about the pre-birth planning of suicide. If you've lost a child or anyone you loved to suicide, I would strongly encourage you to read that book, or at least read that chapter. And in particular, read pages 410 to 411. On those pages, and I'm just going to summarize this here, but you really need to read it in context to fully appreciate it. I'm having a channeling session with Jesus, and we're talking about suicide. And he says to me, and I quote, all suicides preventable by outside forces were indeed prevented. I'll say it again. All suicides preventable by outside forces were indeed prevented. Now, what does he mean by that? What he means is, if a suicidal person has the slightest openness or willingness to change their mind, the universe knows, and the universe stages an intervention. So if no intervention was staged to prevent the suicide, that means there was no openness or willingness for the person to change their mind, which in turn means there was literally nothing you could have done about it. There was literally nothing you could have done if the suicide was completed. By intervention, that could mean almost anything. Sometimes the universe causes a bird to fly by, it distracts the suicidal person, and they don't go through with it. It's as simple as that. Sometimes the universe causes somebody to walk by and smile at the suicidal person. They feel a little bit better, they don't go through with it. I actually know somebody who is a young man in the UK. And years ago, when he was in his 20s, he was suicidal. He was sitting at a train station in the northern UK, having an internal dialogue in his head. He was debating between what he felt were his only two options in life. One was suicide. The other was to rob somebody, take their cash at an ATM. That's how desperate he was. He thought those were his only two viable options. So he's sitting at a train station in the middle of the day, having an internal discussion with himself. Should I take my life or rob someone at an ATM? And he had some slight openness or willingness to change his mind. The universe knew that. And so all of a sudden, a mysterious hooded figure walks up to him. By hooded, I mean the person is literally wearing a hoodie. It's pulled far over the person's face, casting a shadow over their face. So he actually couldn't see the person who was talking to him. This mysterious hooded figure walks up to him in the train station and says to him, "Don't kill yourself. Don't rob somebody at an ATM. There's a spiritual study center a couple blocks down the street from here. Go there, talk to people there, see what happens." And then the mysterious hooded figure walks away. Well, as you can imagine, the young man is shocked that this mysterious figure knew what he was thinking. So he gets up, he walks down the street, he goes to the spiritual study center. He meets the woman who owns it. She says to him, in a couple of days, this American author, me, is going to be giving a talk here. Why don't you come and hear the talk? Which he did. And I had a chance to talk with him privately afterwards, but I play a very minor role in all of this. The important thing that came from that is that he befriended the woman who owned the spiritual study center. She took him into her home for a period of months. And I don't know what happened after that, but I'm hopeful that he used that time to turn his life around and is now leading a much different type of life. So there you have an example of an intervention. That's the kind of intervention Jesus is referring to. As to how we come to talk about this and the broader context, I don't have time to explain all that tonight, but look at the suicide chapter in Your Soul's Gift. If you've lost a child or anyone to suicide, that chapter could be life-changing for you. So I'll turn it over to my beautiful wife.
Aw. Well, I think now might be a good time to take some questions. I want to be sure that we get a chance to answer people's questions.
That's wonderful. And I think that one of the main questions that's coming up, is I suspected it might be, is about soul planning and suicide. And I know that you gave a very good explanation, Rob, but one thing that concerns me is that Teresa, for instance, said, I think we would choose to go through suicide out of absolute love for the person, asking us to come and be there for them, no matter how hard. I know I would agree to anything if my sons asked me. So I believe that this is probably not what our children in spirit want from us, that they really want us to complete whatever we're supposed to be doing here on earth. But maybe you could clarify that, Rob, and talk a little bit more about that.
Could you
So,
clarify the question?
Yeah, I'm not
so that we
clear on.
understand the actual question. And I'm not seeing it.
I think that what she's saying in terms of suicide, it sounds to me like she is saying that a mother would be willing to complete suicide to be, if this is what their child on the other side is asking of them. And I believe that our children on the other side are actually here with us, so they want us to stay here because they can be with us at any moment. If I've understood the question correctly, Teresa, I may have misunderstood. Oh, you're saying no. Okay, I'm sorry. I mean, in our soul planning session. Okay. Oh, okay. I mean, if we were soul planning and wanted us to be with them.
Like, so I think maybe what she's saying is, she's saying that if that soul that that her son's soul asked her to come into this lifetime knowing that she's going to lose him, you know, that she would be willing to do that out of love. Is that what you're saying?
I think that you're right, because she's saying, even though we knew that we were going to lose them early, if they wanted us to come into this life, we would do it no matter what. And that's a beautiful thought, Teresa. I love that. Yes. So would you say that that's true? Rob or Liesel?
I would say that that's true. And I think that that's how exit points in general are handled in the pre-birth planning sessions. You discuss in advance when you think it's most likely that you will transition. Everybody, well, not everybody, but the vast majority have multiple exit points. And generally someone takes an exit point under one of two sets of circumstances. Either they've completed everything they came to do and learn, or the soul concludes that they will not be able to do that. Either way, it's time to go back home. But it's discussed in the pre-birth planning sessions. You know, I think I will probably exit around here. And if it's in what we would call an early death, then everybody is asked to consent to that. You don't have to consent to it, but it's not going to be part of the plan unless everybody, all the significant people, agree to it.
That's beautiful. Kelly is saying this is life-changing, which I think it is for a lot of people when they start to learn more about soul planning. And I'm really happy to have Sarah Rubel on here as well, who is so good at explaining soul planning as well. And let's see, there are so many questions now that are coming up. So I'd like to—
Elizabeth, Carol has a great question. Did you see Carol Barra?
Yeah.
So I'm just, okay, you want to?
Well, no, I can read it.
Okay. Rob, Carol's asking, what if you recognize the virtues and know the incidents that have occurred to propel you, but you choose not to raise your consciousness?
You can do that. You always have free will. Most likely, so what I've seen in my work is that when people choose not to raise their consciousness, when they choose in general not to respond to life in the way the soul would hope for, generally what happens is the challenge tends to come back around again and again, and in increasingly intense form. Now, don't go into fear over that. That is not what I want. That's actually the opposite of what I want. But be aware that that kind of pattern is very common. To the personality, that will feel like a punishment. It's not intended to be a punishment. It's intended to be another opportunity and motivation to learn the underlying lessons.
Yeah, what you can think of it is what the things happening in your life are meant to do is, in a way, provide the kind of pressure that would turn carbon into a diamond. So if you think about how a diamond emerges in the world, it requires this tremendous amount of pressure for it to emerge, for all that structural restructuring within the carbon into this most crystalline form of a diamond. And that's a lot of times what we're doing here on planet Earth. We're going into these situations knowing that they will exert this kind of extreme pressure on us and essentially force evolution, force that restructuring into our, our most diamond-like self, so to speak.
And I would
go ahead.
I just want to add to that. Some of you might know my first book, Your Soul's Plan, was originally self-published under the title Courageous Souls. And then a publisher picked it up and they changed the title. But the reason I chose the title Courageous Souls is that it takes so much courage to plan this kind of challenging life plan before you come into body. And it takes even more courage to execute that kind of pre-birth plan once you get here. As I understand it, those who incarnate on Earth are respected and revered throughout the universe for the tremendous, tremendous courage it takes to live these kinds of life plans. There are many, many beings who know that there would be great benefit to incarnated on Earth, and many of them don't have the courage to come here. The fact that you're here in a body on planet Earth automatically places you among the most courageous beings in the universe.
Yeah. That's a beautiful, beautiful way to think of it. And I agree with you. And Haley is asking something that you've kind of touched on, but I'd like to hear your answer. Is the untimely death of a child always part of the soul's plan? Can the plan be changed?
In general, the more significant something is, the more likely it was discussed prior to birth. But again, there are many, many pre-birth plans. There isn't just one. So an analogy that the beings of light have given through Liesel that I think is helpful, they talk about pre-birth plans as being similar to a stack of sheets of paper. So in this analogy, every individual sheet is a complete set of pre-birth plans. Every individual has their own stack of sheets of paper. Each sheet varies by vibration or frequency. The higher vibrational pre-birth plans are toward the top, the lower vibrational are toward the bottom. The higher vibrational plans are the ones where most of the learning is done through love, peace, and joy, less through pain and suffering. The lower vibrational plans are toward the bottom, where more is done through pain and suffering, less through love, peace, and joy. So when you talk about can the plan be changed, in general, yes, not always, but in general, yes. And that happens at night when you leave your body in the dream state, astral travel to the other side, and you talk with the significant people in your life about whether you're learning what you came to learn and if you need to change anything in order to learn those things. What everybody wants is to move up in their individual stack of sheets of paper. So how do you do that? The way that you do that is quite simple, but not necessarily easy. And that is, anytime you have to make any decision, no matter how big or small, ask yourself the following question. What would love, with a capital L, do now? Whatever the answer to that question is, do that. The more you can do that, the more you ascend in your individual stack of sheets of paper.
Wonderful.
I'd like to take this opportunity to share my own experience with not with I don't have children, so not with the passing of a child, but with the passing of my father, which I know I'm not drawing any comparison at all, because I know that is, that's something that we tend to expect in life. We expect our parents to pass. Whereas we don't necessarily expect our children to pass. But what I want to share is that the experience of my father passing and what happened subsequently really, really reframed my perspective on death. So my father had cancer, and he died in home hospice, and we were all there with him. And after he passed, I, of course, cried a lot and grieved. But what I noticed, like several weeks later, is I noticed that I could feel his energy with, not just even with me, but actually in me. It was like he was in my field. And this sort of grew over the course of the next several months, that there's just this feeling of his presence being in my field. And it actually was very interesting because I actually felt closer to him after he passed than I did when he was alive. And there was this beautifulness, this preciousness to feeling him almost be a part of me. And I share that because I want people to know that kind of closeness in your heart space, that kind of closeness of a merging of energies and souls is entirely possible. And actually it's becoming more and more common. It's becoming more and more something that is being chosen from a pre-birth planning perspective, that especially in this current time period where all of humanity is going through an ascension process in terms of its collective vibration, and Mother Earth is going through this ascension process too, that souls are really deciding, do I want to be in physical form for this process? Do I want to be on the other side? And what's happening is that beings that are in close relationship with one another, there's this opportunity for, if one being is staying in physical form and the other is transitioning, there is this opportunity for a sense of union, and where the being that has transitioned to really, really, bring this energy into the person who's staying in physical form. And we have gotten a lot of feedback, from people in our workshops that that's going on, and that there's a person who's part of our membership program, and she lost her daughter to suicide, and she now channels her daughter, and her daughter's in the angelic realm, and of course there's still that grief for her, but there's also just this beautiful connection, and we've watched her just blossom in terms of her ability to be in a place of joy and peace now, and bring forward what her daughter is sharing with her. So I just share that so that you have this knowledge that there's still this possibility of this deep and rich connection with your loved one, even when they are not in physical form. And in some ways there can be a closeness that's even deeper than when two beings are in physical form. You aren't able to merge in that kind of way. So I hope that provides some comfort.
That's beautiful. Yes, it does, I think, for everyone. And I have another question. This one is from Ish, and he's asking, do our kids who left early come to this world with a specific goal for themselves, or do they come to our lives to help us reach our goals?
I think it's both. Very often, as I understand it, when a child dies young, especially if it's very young, a lot of times it's a young soul who doesn't have many earthly incarnations, perhaps even none at all. And all they really want to do is dip a toe in the water. They want to see what Earth is like, but for the first incarnation, they don't want to spend a whole lot of time here. So the way that fits in with the parents' pre-birth plan, if we come back to divine virtues, of course, when the child dies, that has the effect of breaking open the hearts of the parents. And that is one of the more common motivations for agreeing pre-birth to lose a child. There's a form of Japanese art, and I can't remember the name now, maybe somebody here will know. But what they do is they'll take an object of art, like a porcelain vase, and they'll smash it into pieces. And then they reassembled the pieces and they essentially glue them back together using liquid gold, which when it cools, solidifies. So the vase is reassembled with these strands, these lines of shimmering gold in between what used to be the broken pieces of the vase. And so in some respects, the vase is actually much more beautiful after the shattering and the rebuilding than it was beforehand. And that, I think, is similar to what's happening with the human heart. It's broken open, sometimes in very, very painful ways. And then through a healing process, it stitches itself back together, and the heart that it reforms, so to speak, holds more compassion, holds more unconditional love, holds more light, has a greater knowing of its strength and power, and so on, with all the divine virtues. There's a beauty in that is hard for the human mind to comprehend, but it's a beauty you perceive very clearly before you agree to a plan like that. And it's one you'll perceive very clearly in your life review when you see what came out of the experience.
That's beautiful. I just want to say that Veronica is agreeing with Liesel. She's saying, true. I felt like a part of my son merged with my energy soul and is always here, always. And Megan is saying, yes, same here. And we have time for one more question. Actually, Teresa is also saying something that I think is important. She's saying that I think it is very hard for us to imagine taking on this kind of plan we have endured and still endure. If we hadn't gone through all of this pain, we really wouldn't be the same people we've become, or we are still to become, which I think is very important as well. And then Megan is saying totally, it's really very powerful when you look at it through a different lens. But I had one other question, and I guess that this is just something that has been affecting our world and especially our group for so long. And it's about this fentanyl epidemic. We have so many parents who have had children transition because of the fentanyl epidemic. I guess that the mom is asking, is this a part of what was planned beforehand? So is this a part of the Great Awakening then? Could you, either Rob or Liesel, maybe address that?
Well, the transition of the child, in my view, is certainly something that would have been discussed and agreed to prior to birth. Whether or not it happened through fentanyl is probably something that was set up as one of several potentials. So, for example, in Your Soul's Plan, there's a chapter about the pre-birth planning of accidents. And one of the stories in that chapter is about a woman who's blown up in a bomb explosion. And she agrees to this experience in her pre-birth planning session. Then I asked the question in the channeling session, well, what would have happened if the bomber had used his free will to never plant the bomb? And the response was that there were what we could call backup plans, such as an automobile accident or some other kind of accident that would have served essentially the same function as being in the bomb explosion. So one way or another, she was going to go through an intensive healing process in order to become a very powerful healer. That was her pre-birth intention. I imagine it's the same thing when we talk about fentanyl. If it weren't fentanyl, it would be something else.
Yes, I can imagine. And one of the things too that everyone's asking about is they're all saying that they would like to be able to have a past life regression and learn more about what you both are doing. So maybe you could tell us about upcoming sessions and what you're doing. I know you're working with the Shift Network and you have free sessions that exist as well, but maybe you could tell us a little bit more about how to get in touch with you and if you do have anything coming up.
Lisa, you want to talk about the Ascension workshop?
Sure. So we don't have well, unfortunately, we don't have any more free talks coming up. We just had a free talk. When was it? This past week. But we do have coming up with this coming Tuesday. We have our Aligning with Ascension workshop. And Rob, do you want to explain Ascension a little bit? I feel like you give a really good explanation.
So as probably many of you know, the earth and every being on the earth is going through an ascension process, which means literally ascending or rising up in vibration. Ascension is being caused, as I understand it, by a lot of divine light direct from source flooding the planet. We've moved from third density or the third dimension into fourth density, and we're on our way to fifth density, which is a vibration of oneness consciousness and unconditional love. So essentially, we're going home without leaving the physical body if we choose to stay on the planet. So the light that's creating ascension also creates something called purification, which essentially means that it brings to the surface, to conscious awareness, everything unlike itself, everything of a lower vibration. In short, that means that your stuff is going to come up. It's going to come into conscious awareness so that you can process it and release it, because those lower vibrational energies can't go with you into fifth density. So in the Ascension workshop on Tuesday, we'll talk more about purification and what it looks and feels like and how to respond to it. We also have a Between Lives Soul Regression workshop coming up. That's a week from Sunday. It will be September 17th, roughly 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time until 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So we do the Between Lives Soul Regression as a group online in this workshop. And basically what that process consists of, there are some preliminary steps to help you relax physically and mentally. And then I guide everybody into a past life. It's almost always a past life that had a big impact on the plan for the current lifetime, or is in some way thematically related to the current lifetime. You experience 4 different scenes there, the last of which is the death scene. Your consciousness leaves the body in the death scene in the past life and crosses back over to the other side, which I know sounds a little bit ominous, but there's actually nothing to it. It's very gentle and easy. When you get back to the other side, most likely a spirit guide will greet you. The guide will tell you what you need to know about the past life, why it's relevant and important. And then the guide will take you to your council of elders, the beings who oversee your personal evolution. And when you get to your council, I'll prompt everybody to ask a very long series of questions that will cover all the major areas of your life. So by the time we're done, you should have a pretty good idea of what you planned, why, how you're doing, and how you can better fulfill your plans. And we created a discount code for everybody who's here. If you're registering for either one of the workshops, at some point on the Eventbrite page, you'll see text referring to a box for a coupon code. Click on the text, the box will open. Type in fall 15, all capital letters, fall 15, FALL15, and that will take 15% off. And I believe the code is good until noon Eastern Time on Saturday. But for those who are asking in the chat, how do you find out which virtues you're working on? You can ask your council of elders. How do you find out how your child is doing on the other side? A lot of times loved ones will come into your meeting with the council. It's not something that is officially part of the regression, but frequently people ask their council to bring loved ones in, and then you have an opportunity to talk with them directly. They can reassure you that they are well and thriving on the other side, and they can explain in detail why this was part of the plan.
Yeah, and also we don't have one on the calendar right now, but intermittently we do a 2-day workshop. And that 2-day workshop, the first day of the 2-day workshop is there's a contact a deceased loved one regression. And so of course you can contact loved ones on the other side. And then also that first day of the 2-day workshop, Rob takes people through that divine virtues exercise that he developed. And then the second day of that workshop is the Between Lives Soul Regression that Rob just described. So the workshop that we have coming up on the 17th is just a 1-day workshop. So it's just that Between Lives Soul Regression, but you can watch our event page, and at some point we'll definitely have another 2-day weekend long workshop that has both of those days.
And I think Liesel mentioned earlier, we do free Zoom calls, usually every other month, for about 90 minutes, talking about pre-birth planning or any spiritual subject people want to talk about. You can find out about those by signing up for the newsletter at yoursoulsplan.com. The free evenings are always announced in the newsletter.
Yeah, another thing I want to share is we have a monthly membership community where we, once a month, it's the third Tuesday of every month, we have a live meeting that's recorded. And it's this amazing community of people. It's so loving and so supportive. And, we just really, everybody is just so kind and generous to one another. And, Rob and I generally, share a teaching. I often will channel a meditation, often a longer one than what we did tonight. I share new channelings from the Beings of Light. We share material from our upcoming book. And when you join the membership program, then you have access to all the past, the last year's worth of membership meetings. There's, 12 of them on the membership homepage, and we have excerpted a lot of the meditations, and all the channelings are in there. So there's just a lot of resources. And I think, the members have really felt like this is just a really, really great resource for them. So if that resonates for you, we would love to have you become a part of that community.
And I see somebody is asking in the chat, how do they remember all the answers from their Council of Elders? You'd be surprised. The average person has very good recall, but to help with that, when the workshop is over, we send the list of questions to all the participants. So if you've forgotten one or two of them, that will jar your memory.
That's wonderful. That sounds like a lot of information that is very helpful that we'll be able to put on this video as well. So if anyone has missed it in the chat box, I'll be sure to post it on the YouTube video. And it's been wonderful to have both of you here this evening. Thank you. Everyone's saying thank you for all of this information and for your enlightenment. And this has been such a wonderful meeting. And we always ask everyone to say thank you and good evening.
Yes.
All
Thank
of
you, Rob. Thank you, Liesel. This was
Thank
wonderful.
you, Rob.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Rachel.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you so much.
here as well.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.